welcome you all here. My name is Jim Kempton. I'm the Executive Director of the California Surf Museum. And tonight we have someone who is embedded into surfing's culture in so many ways. I met Shaun in 1975, filming a film called Free Ride. And that movie was a groundbreaking film in that it was the first time that people had seen surfers riding really, really deep tubes. People had been riding tubes, but they had no idea how deep you go. And Shaun and a group of the guys from the Free Ride 76 Revolutionaries, they were called, went out to off the wall and pipe and surfed that place so deeply that it changed the way people thought about what could be done inside a tube. And Shaun was really the spearhead of that. But that wasn't all he did. He then very soon became a world champ. Stayed on the tour for a number of years, and then something that very, very few athletes in any sport are able to do, and that's transition to another career and be just as successful in it as they are in the one that they became famous for. And Shaun has started this talk, and it's partly because I always say to him when I introduce him, this is the ambassador of surfing. And that name has really stuck and it's really been proven. But what he's going to talk about tonight is how to use the idea of surfing and all its forms and all its joy to raise the level of consciousness that you have and to enrich your lives. So I won't stay any longer up here. I'm just going to introduce Mr. Shaun Tomson.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for that very warm introduction, and thank you for the very warm applause. And to everyone that's come, I know how busy everyone is in life today, and it's wonderful that you've come to hear my perspective, and also to hear some stories about this beautiful little book that I wrote so long ago that has fundamentally changed my life and has helped transform many, many other lives. So a quick shout out, well, a big shout out to Jim, of course, for inviting me. The first time I ever had a cover in a surfing magazine in the United States, which was Surfer Magazine, Jim was the editor of, and he put me on the cover. So Jim, thanks for that. Another shout out to one of the unsung heroes of professional surfing, and that's Al Patterson. Where are you, Al? Put your hand up. So Al, you most probably haven't heard of him, but the year that I won the world title, there was actually two complementary circuits. One was called the Beachcomber Bills. It was a famous footwear brand. It was back in the day as famous as, say, Reef is today. And Al got them to sponsor. And I remember I walked up and I got a $5,000 check. And we had a beautiful black tie event at the Turtle Bay, the Kualima it was called back then. And, you know, all the surfers were there, from Eddie Arkau to Michael Peterson. Everyone was there in their tuxedos. And it was sort of really the kickoff for pro surfing. So Al's here tonight. I haven't seen him for a few years. Well done there, Al. And then you know, a lot of you know that I had a cool surfing brand back in the 70s I started called Instinct. And my partner, Will Regan, and a whole crew of Instinct, we relaunched the brand here tonight. So, and Troy, our designer's here. So it's really wonderful to have the Instinct team here tonight who haven't heard me speak before. So I wanted to just read you something that I wrote quickly about this little book and about words. So the reading of a book can be a life-changing experience. Books can give us comfort in tough times and give us hope in days of despair. And certainly in the context of what's happening in the world today, books can really be powerful. Books can also offer up a different perspective that can reshape one's world view. I love the power of words and how we can all use our own words to transform our own lives if we make the promise and carry through on the commitment. So today I'm going to talk to you about a perspective and stories behind the book, but also I'm going to talk to you about this unbelievable method that surfing gave me. It's the most transformational method that anyone can use if they want to make change in their lives. It's really, truly incredible, and it has come all from surfing. So this was my first book 20 years ago. Patrick Moser and I wrote it together, and someone tonight came here with their two children and said to me, Shaun, why did you re-release it? And he was here with his Penelope, And where's the little family? And I said, and Theo, I said, I've written it for your children, for Penelope and Theo, 13 and 11. And that's why I wrote it. So over the years, specifically over the last 20 years since I wrote this book, I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. I speak at the finest universities in the world. I just recently did 3 events at Harvard University, USC, UCLA. I talk to the biggest companies in the world, GM, Cisco, Gap, Disney, so many. And I talk about how words have got unbelievable power to change our mind state. So what's mind state? Mind state's how we all feel about life. Simple concept of like, what do you feel about life? And I ask people right at the beginning of my presentations, we're not going to do the exercise, but I ask them, text me a word that describes your mind state. Just one word that describes what you're feeling about life. And I started doing it when COVID hit in March 20. And my very first client, it was a live stream because there was no personal interaction back then, as you remember, was a very, very successful company at the time. This is sort of a reflection of the mind state. So what happens when people text me a word, the more frequent words, the more popular words are larger. So at a glance, say you've got 1,000 people on a live stream, they're from all over the world, you can see the consciousness of the entire group. So you can see these words that over this period, and even today, how negative the words are. And this was from Harvard recently. It was amazing. You know, I mentioned how words have got great power. So this piece of Kennedy's famous speech, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do, is everywhere to inspire these young people who are going to be the future leaders of the world. But when I asked them, describe what you're feeling about life, confused, overwhelmed, uncertain, a lot of negativity. It's amazing how you can control your mind state because this group were timeshare salesmen, and every single word is positive. How about that? 100% commission. This is a big group in Mexico, but every single word was positive. So what I have seen over the last number of years since I started doing this for the last 6 years, I call it a sad mind state. Stress, anxiety, depression, disconnection. So I'm telling you this because surfing has great power to create transformational change in people's mind states. I've discovered that you tell some surfing stories, you get everyone to write the code, and you can have incredible transformational change through this code that came from the book that I wrote 20 years ago. So this is what I do, and this is what I do with corporate America and schools and universities and prisons, mind state change from this stress, anxiety, depression, disconnection to what I call the code mind state. It's just a shift, commitment, optimism, discipline, and engagement. So check this out. This is from and I'm not going to mention the name of the university, one of the most famous universities here in San Diego. This is a study of 258 students, tired, overwhelmed, anxious. And this was relatively recently. So students are in a tough space. But what's amazing, you tell 4 stories about surfing, get people to write the code, share the code, and when they leave, I ask them, text me a word you're going to take home with you. Check it out. Check the power of surfing stories. There's not one negative word. There's 258 students. Start point, surf stories, write code, share code. And this is what I do now. And you can see I love what I do. I love telling stories, and I love creating transformational impact through the values of surfing and through the values of that little card that you all have on your seat there. So words have got great power. They've got great power for negativity, as we see in the world today on social media and in the press and the media, but they've got great power for positivity. So where does the power come from? Where does this power that we have to create change in our lives and the changes of lives of our families and business associated? It comes from purpose. So what I do with my method, I help people find purpose very quickly. It's not my purpose, but it's just a simple method for people to find their purpose. Find your purpose, find your power, find your path. This code that everyone writes, 12 lines, every line begins with "I will," has got so much incredible power. So this is what I do. I share stories. And why are stories so powerful? I mean, we've been telling stories since the dawn of time, since the days that we lived in caves. But this is a recent study out of Stanford. Stories are remembered up to 22 times more than facts alone. How about this? So I bet you didn't think you were going to go in this direction tonight. But this is how powerful stories are. And surfing stories have got exponentially, I don't know why it is, but they seem to have exponentially more power than just a story about a football player winning the Super Bowl. People get immersed in surfing stories, and I don't know what it is. And I like to think that when I tell a surf story, I tell my perspective. It's both a mirror, it's where people are at in their lives, and it's a window into where life can be. So my story started on the beach in Durban, South Africa, 11,000 miles from here. My mom was a survivor from the island of Malta in the Second World War, the most heavily bombed place in the history of the world. She endured 3,600 air raids. It was a British strategic seaport in the Mediterranean, and it was bombed by the Nazis and the Italians. My dad was a swimming champion. Some of you might have heard this story before, but my dad was a swimming champion at 13, South African junior swimming champion. His dream was to win an Olympic gold medal, and his hero was Duke Kahanamoku. How about that? How about that? So I knew about Duke Kahanamoku before I started surfing as my dad's swimming hero. My dad would talk about Duke. So now my dad volunteers for the Second World War, flies in American bombers. They used to have jokes about the Americans because he was based in Alexandria in Egypt. And the Americans would come and he was flying American bombers. And he'd say, what did he say about the Americans? He would say, they overpaid, oversexed, and over here. So he flew American bombers, bombed ironically, the same Germans and Italians that were bombing my mom, came back from the war, resumed his swimming career. Now he's out there on a little wooden surfboard, and this is, I believe, the first recorded attack of a surfer. My dad's out there on his little wooden surfboard, and those are his words from the front page of the local paper. I was lifted clear from the water. It was an ideal day for surfing and for sharks. A Zambezi shark, which is like a great white shark on steroids, smaller but way meaner, came up underneath him and hit him so hard, it lifted him to the air and shredded his arm in one bite from the shoulder all the way down to his wrist and left him there to die. He said all his friends deserted him. In fact, there was a pier, they called it West Street Pier, which had mussels on it, and people saw the attack and they were out there and they climbed up the mussels and they all got shredded and they thought there'd been multiple attacks because so many people were bleeding just to get away from there. And years later, when I came to understand what had happened to my dad, and I asked him, I said, Daddy, what happened to the shark? And he said, I was really lucky. He said, the shark bit me and then circled me and the water was red with my blood, and then it died of blood poisoning. That's how my dad looked at life. He always looked at life with a great sense of humor and a big grin on his face. So now he manages to survive, and he's going through a long period of recuperation. And luckily, his father was pretty affluent. His father had immigrated from Russia. We're a Jewish family during the pogroms when they were slaughtering the Jews in Russia, and started to become successful. So he sends my dad over to San Francisco now to have arm surgery. And I found this a couple of weeks ago. I found this letter. My dad is now in San Francisco, ripped by shark, 2 years in hospital, will go surfing again. Tomson, his spirits undampened, writes to a friend in Cape Town to say that he hopes to be well enough one day to ride the giant breakers of Hawaii. How about that? Isn't that a classic? So my dad's going through the recuperation in San Francisco and goes, well, I'm going to go and meet my hero. I'm going to fly to Hawaii and I'm going to recuperate. So he flies over to Hawaii and befriends the whole Kahanamoku clan. Now, I like to think that during this terrible period of my father's life, when he's no more Olympic gold medal when his whole life has changed, is that the whole Hawaiian Beach Boy ethos really connected him to the spirit of recovery and to this great love that my father developed for Hawaii. We were the only household in South Africa where no shoes were allowed inside. Everything, like Hawaiian style, your shoes had to be left outside. And my dad just had this great abiding love for Hawaii. So we lived right across the road from the beach. My father taught me how to, he could still swim, but not, at an Olympic level. He took me out and he taught me how to swim and surf right there at the break right in front of our home called the Bay of Plenty. I mean, if you're a surfer, that's a bloody good wave. And I caught my first wave in the whitewater. I surfed in my first surf comp right there. I like to think I was an instant success. I got third in my very first event. There was only 3 of us, but I got my third. I rocked my third. But I think that's the way I looked at competition throughout my career. Yeah, the result was important, but my dad had these very strong values. So I started to do better than third out of 3. My dad fell in love with surfing. The more I surfed, the more he loved it. He decided, I'm going to start a pro surfing competition in South Africa, which still is the longest running professional surfing event in the world, even longer than Bell's. Bell's Beach has been running longer, but not as a professional event. So my dad started this in 1969. Of course, he puts his son on the cover of the program. That's a picture of me and then he even built a sheet metal shop, built that beach buggy, handmade. We had the first beach buggy in South Africa. You can see our V-bottom boards on the top. I made my first cover of a surfing magazine when I was 12. A guy called L.B. Felsen, very famous surfing photographer who made Morning of the Earth, came to South Africa with Bob Evans, and they took me down to Jeffreys Bay to surf. It was a wonderful memory. So when I was 14, it was a pivotal change for me. I just had my bar mitzvah, I'm Jewish, and my dad took me to Hawaii to surf the big stuff in Hawaii. That was the day I met Greg Knoll and all the big, I was actually out there earlier in the day when Greg Knoll got his big wave and nearly drowned. But I came back to South Africa with a lot of confidence. I managed to make the South African surfing team. There's a #1 seed. My dad was so proud. And then I started to develop my surfing career. So now my dad's running this event. He's got someone else to take over the running of this event. It became called the Gunston 500. And my dad loves Hawaii. So he decides, I'm going to invite 3 of the greatest Hawaiian surfers to come and compete and show us young guys in South Africa what cutting edge surfing is all about. So he invites out Jeff Hackman, he invites out Billy Hamilton, and he invites out Eddie Aikau. So they check into the hotel, and Eddie checks into the hotel, and the manager goes, no way. Segregated society, no blacks allowed in this hotel. Because the South Africa that I grew up in the 70s was a segregated society. It was under a system called apartheid, which means apartness. Black kids went to one school, white kids went to another school, colored kids went to another school, Indian kids went to another school. They had all these crazy racial classifications. So now Eddie is supposed to be checked in to the Malibu Hotel. That was the name of the hotel on the beach that refused him entry. So we went down, we picked him up, and Eddie came and stayed with us. And I think that he never, ever forgot the aloha that we extended to him as a family while he was in segregated South Africa. I would take him, I was like 15 years old, I would take him surfing every morning, and it was like mind-blowing to see the culture that I was living in through the eyes of someone else. And it was really the first time that I sort of came to understand the injustice of the apartheid regime. So we introduced Eddie to these great friends of ours, the Holmes family. They took him to Jeffreys Bay. And a lot of people wonder why when us young guys went through a beef period in Hawaii during the transition, the creation of professional surfing, I'll talk about it a little bit later, but like, why did Eddie be the peacemaker. And I think he was the peacemaker because he had aloha extended to him when he came to South Africa. I love that picture in the bottom there with the whole Aikau ohana. So 1972, I get my first picture in the newspaper, a water shot. And my dad, he's a marketing guy. He started the first pro contest in the world. And he goes, wow, son, I really love this picture. He connects with a friend of his who's a graphic artist, and he gets him to create this rendition, this like logo from this picture. And my dad says to me, son, this is going to go on every one of your surfboards. I'm going, no, Dad, it's too big, man. I was a shy kid. I was like 15. He goes, this is the deal. I pay for the boards. The logo goes on the boards. So the logo over a period became super famous. As I started to develop my surfing career, you can see the logo on the board here. I was 17 then. I was doing my military service. I was actually a rifleman in the Army, and I won my first major pro event. The event my dad started, it was called the Gunston 500. In fact, my commandant gave me special leave to go and compete, and I remember I did really well, and I made it all the way through to the finals, and I was surfing against all these legendary surfers, and we were all standing up on the podium waiting for the results to be announced. And this event was a very big sporting event in South Africa because during apartheid and segregation, not many international surfing events or not many international sporting events in South Africa. So we'd have massive crowds, 30, 40,000 people. So I'm standing up on the podium with the 5 other finalists, and there's a big tower that they've erected on the beach where the judges are and all the administration. And we're on the podium, and my dad's in the tower. Now, I know my father knows the results. Okay, and I look up at him and I go, Dad, how have I done? And my dad looks down at me and he goes, gives me the thumbs down. Yeah, I go, oh no, Dad. And then they start announcing the results. 6th, 5th, 4th. First place, Shaun Tomson. And I put my hands up and I look at my dad, and my dad thinks it's the biggest bloody joke in the world. He was, and it was a fundamental lesson for me, I think, to know that, yeah, winning's important, but it's not that important. It's not everything in life. So I just used to have such fun with my father through my career. And you can see that was the event. It was called the Durban 500, became the Gunston 500, and then became a very big event on the world tour, and was won by many of the most famous surfing, guys like Andy Irons and Kelly. They all used to come out and compete. So during that period, my home break of the Bay of Plenty, I showed you where I started surfing, became like the epicenter of surfing in South Africa. And when it was over 8 feet, it was a very serious wave, which really gave me a lot of training to go and take the techniques I learned at the Bay of Plenty over to Hawaii. And in those days in Hawaii, this was the quiver. These were the boards that we used to use. They were all called single fin round pintails. And we were lucky enough back in those days, because we had no money, to get sponsored by Lightning Bolt. Jack Shipley and Jerry Lopez gave us the boards, and we had to give them back. So you can see the 4 boards on the right are all Lightning Bolts, and the other 4 boards are by a guy called Spider Murphy in South Africa, who made me some amazing equipment. So 1975, 76, us young guys are starting to see that there could be potential in actually making a living from going surfing and creating a professional surfing circuit. So along with Randy Rarick, who was one of the Hawaii's top surfers, just a fantastic surfer, a guy called Fred Hemmings, 1968 world amateur champion from Puerto Rico, put together this circuit. But prior to putting together the circuit, this band of merry men had this mission, man. Rabbit Bartholomew, Ian Cairns, Peter Townend, Mark Richards, my cousin Michael. These were the most talented, radical, visionary thinkers in the world. And I made a movie a few years back, and we covered this kind of revolutionary attitude that we all had, and this dream that we had that one day, we'd be able to make a living from going surfing by busting down the door.
Thousands of young men were being sent each week to fight in the steamy jungles of Vietnam. A short stretch of coast on the island of Oahu, Hawaii, was emerging at the center of the surfing universe.
Surfing reflected sort of a counterculture idea.
The image that came out of the Summer of Love era was that surfers were really druggies.
Then this new group came along and said, no, we're not going to do that at all. In fact, we want to make surfing into a sport. And everyone turned around and just went, they want to do what?
There was no such thing as pro surfers, because you couldn't make a living from pro surfing.
You had this irrational group of kids, and they walked into this town just going, hey, you got some new moves, you got some new boards, you got some new attitude.
Hawaii was a twofold mission. It was one, I wanted to rip it, and two, I wanted to get famous.
Something was getting ready to launch, and then all of a sudden, there it was.
We said we were good. You know, we were number one. It's indisputable.
This whole thing of trying to break in and establish a sport, it took a very, very strong attitude.
They'd write articles about how we're here, you know, we're the kings of the sport.
And this brash attitude of screw the establishment, we're going to go for whatever it takes to get what we want, it rubbed people the wrong way in Hawaii, without a doubt.
They just really wanted a big slice of pie. The problem was they wanted too big of a slice of the pie.
They did it for nothing, you know, they did it just for the love of surfing.
It's timeless stuff, you know, it's stuff that will probably never be repeated.
Well, they came here at a time when it was pretty wild, you know, more rough than it is these days, like the Wild Wild West.
Ian writes a headline on my column, Aloha is dead.
There was a pride at stake here.
I went to Wahiwa and bought a shotgun, I bought a 12 gauge, slept with it by my bed.
They could not go anywhere.
So whose house did they want to burn down but Al Patterson's house? Because that's who Rabbit was staying with, eh, boy? And Ian Cairns, yeah, so he was like right in the absolute firing line. So from those sort of very, very scary beginnings, pro surfing was born. Ultimately, I won the world title in 1977. The last event of the year was the World Cup at Haleiwa. I was in the finals with my late cousin Michael. I was in the cover of all the magazines. So suddenly, pro surfing was happening. So 1978, my cousin Michael, now Michael and I were like brothers growing up. He would spend every single weekend at my house. When the surf was good, my dad would pick my brother and I up from school. Then we'd go and pick Mike up and we'd surf. And every surf trip, Mike would come with us. But we were super competitive, Mike and I. So Mike was on the Pro Tour for a couple of years. And then he says to me, no, Shaun, I'm bailing out. I'm going to start a new brand. I'm going to start a new clothing company. And I'm going to call it Gotcha. This is 1978. And I'm going, no way. Michael's starting a brand. I'm going to start a brand too. So 79, because he was so competitive, I start Instinct. And what was cool, because of my dad, I had the logo that was world famous. It had been on the logo, you know, been on the covers of all the magazines. So I was halfway there. Now, all I had to do was figure out what name I was going to call the brand. Of course, for me back then, you know, my history, you know, I was known for riding inside the tube and developing a new technique inside the tube, and the best tubes happen on Instinct, so it was sort of an organic connectivity with the logo and Instinct. And I said to you earlier that stories are powerful, words are powerful, stories are remembered 22 times more than facts alone. So all of our Instinct ads were stories. They were all about a little segment of the surfing experience. Surfing is life, the rest is details. This was my favorite. And surf shops still have this up there, waiting for waves is okay. Most people spend their lives waiting for nothing. So it was wonderful to be able to be an entrepreneur, to be able to compete with Mike, and also to start building a brand. Because in those days, the sponsorships were so slim. I mean, I was the number one guy, and I think O'Neill was paying me like $400 a month to wear their wetsuits. So, you know, I had to like go on my own path. But one of the best things about being an entrepreneur and having my own brand is that I was able to mentor and I was able to sponsor other young guys and help them realize their dreams. So this is a picture of me at the top, and it's a picture of a guy called Tom Carroll at the bottom. I started sponsoring Tom Carroll very, very early in his career. Ultimately, he won a world title for Instinct in 1984. And then in 1985, I led the tour the whole year until the very last event, the ungrateful little bastard beat me. And we were 1 and 2. Great guy. I love Tom. And then I sponsored Barton Lynch to win a world title in 1988. Find out where the limits are and start from there. So it was great, you know, for the first time to be able to, become a mentor and help other young guys realize their dreams. So, like I said, I called it Instinct because the best moments in surfing happen when you're driving through that tube and you're operating on instinct.
You know, I think everyone was starting to experiment a little bit with equipment. You know, Shaun on that blue slide and Murphy board with the yellow and yellow wetsuit was pioneering. You know, the depth that you could ride in the tube and off the water.
We were all just sort of taking off, and you'd set up the tube, follow that line, and hopefully you'd come out, you know? And you were breaking your tracks, you were going up and down, and you're actually surfing very similar to how the guys surf down the tube, you know?
To a deep barrel, certainly feels like time's expanding, like life has slowed down. I felt that I could curve that wall to my will. I really felt that. It's a magical moment. It's an incredible moment.
My God, he changed the way we rode tubes off the wall. Like all of us at the time, we were thinking about what we could do to leave our mark. And Shaun, you know, had a huge influence of the evolvement of modern day tube riding.
He's doing things on single fins in the 70s that, you know, a lot of guys aren't doing on their thrusters now. You know, the barrel shots, there's some slow motion shots of him riding the foam ball. Just unbelievable, modern, way ahead of his time barrel riding.
Yeah, so that was such a special time. It was such a beautiful time of freedom and creativity and innovation. And I had to pay Kelly Slater a lot of money to say that. So it's wonderful now to be able to bring Instinct back. You know, I sold Instinct when I retired from the tour in 1990, and then a couple of years back, well, a year ago in March, we relaunched it with my partner, Will, who's here tonight. And it's wonderful to be back in the business again at trade shows. We've got a trade show tomorrow called Carve Trade Show here in San Diego, you know, supporting the heritage and culture of surfing. And it's wonderful to go into shops and see them, you know, giving Instinct a go, because as a lot of you know, the surf market has gone through an incredible period of turmoil, disruption. A lot of the big brands went bankrupt. They were all acquired by private equity. So it's nice to come back with some soul, some authenticity, and some spirit, and we're having a lot of fun out there, you know, selling into the shop. So at the high point of my career, I get in the mid-'80s, I get a call from a guy. He said, "Shaun, my name's Glenn Henning, and we're starting a new foundation called Surfrider Foundation, dedicated to preserving and protecting the world's waves, oceans, and beaches. Malibu's facing a severe environmental challenge. We need your help to highlight the ethos and to highlight the mission of this organization." He said, "What we really need from you, we want you to be our first ambassador, first Pro Surfer member, and we need a poster for you that describes mission." So like I told you right in the beginning, words have got great power, and I went home and I thought, wow, well, what can I do? And I found a great picture from a famous surf photographer called Aaron Chang of me doing a backside turn at Pipeline, and I wrote 5 words. And for me, those 5 words I wrote, "Do a good turn today," have been a turning point in my life. And, you know, when you look back on one's life and you come to those turning points and forks in the road, like Yogi Berra says, if you come to a fork in the road, take it. I think this was a fundamental moment for me. And this, for me, was the first time that I'd got involved with something that was about community and about upliftment. And it wasn't about winning. It was about doing something good for the community. So today, Surfrider Foundation hundreds of thousands of members around the world. We've raised, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars, all to protect the world's waves, oceans, and beaches. In fact, on Sunday, we're doing a big paddle out up in where I live in Refugio in Santa Barbara to stop the oil drilling. I mean, an oil well caught fire 2 days ago right in the channel there. So Surf Ride is still very active, and I'm still very involved, and it's wonderful to be connected to this amazing organization, and really understanding that these words that we write, our words, have got great power. So after I retired from the tour, my wife and I were living back in South Africa, and South Africa was going through a transition from apartheid, from segregation to democracy. Nelson Mandela was released from prison in 1990. 1994, South Africa had its first democratic elections. And suddenly we had, it was called the Rainbow Nation, and equal rights for all. But the country was still going through a period of disruption. My wife and I had a business. We were held up at gunpoint, car was stolen, and I went down to the local gun shop and I picked out a massive, like a bazooka. It was a .357 stainless steel Magnum. I said to my wife, I'm bringing home this gun tomorrow. She said, you're not bringing home the gun tomorrow. You're getting on a plane and you're going to the United States and you're going to go and look for a job. I went, okay. My wife's a powerful lady. Jim knows her, beautiful, powerful. So I got on a plane and now I come over to the United States and I'm looking for a job. And I start knocking on the doors of all the famous surfing companies, all the brands whose business through pro surfing I'd help, we'd help build. And I remember knocking on one door after the other. And every single one of them said no. And I thought I was quite a catch. I had a formal university education. I mean, my cousin and I were the only two formally educated guys on the pro tour. I had an economics degree. I'd started Instinct, had been successful, and I'd sold it. I'd been a pretty good bloke, and none of them were willing to give me a chance. So I phoned my wife. I said, Carla, I can't believe it. She said, you've got to keep trying. So, of course, when the shit hits the fan, what do? You go and get a new surfboard. So I drive up the coast and to Santa Barbara, and Al Merrick had made me many boards through my career. I loved Al. I met him in Hawaii at Bill Barnfield's house, and I was the first pro surfer Al ever shaped a board for. First twin fin he ever shaped. He shaped for me. So I go up to Al ordering some boards, and I told him about my predicament. Be knocking on the doors and no one's going to give me a chance. He said, hey, Shaun, I've got an idea. There's a super cool little company in Ventura. They make great fleecy jackets. And the owner's a surfer. I'm going, who is this company? He said, it's called Patagonia. I went, Patagonia? The only Patagonia I know is a mountain range in Chile. He goes, no, the owner's a surfer and they make cool fleecy jackets. So I immediately phone up Patagonia and I go, listen, Shaun Tomson, and guy goes, oh, wow, how cool is that? Very impressed. They're very impressed that Shaun Tomson's friend. I said, I'd love to come down and possibly interview for a position. I'll come down next day. Come down the next day. And as I walk in to Patagonia, I'll never forget this, man. I walk into the HQ and I see there's a school that's adjacent to the headquarters. And I go to the guy I'm meeting. I go, what's with the school? He goes, it's our school. It's our school for the kids of our employees. I went, wow, this is the sort of company I want to work for, a company that has values beyond profit, sales, and growth. So I said, but I need an offer by the end of the day. They gave me an offer by the end of the day, and they were amazing to me. They flew my whole family out, and I managed to be located right next door to Rincon. Their offices were like 12 miles from Rincon. So for 2 years, I worked for Patagonia, and I had the greatest time working closely with Yvonne, his wife, Melinda. And, it was just a different company. It was a company that was really driven by purpose. It wasn't just profit, sales, and growth, but it was like, what can we do for the community? What can we do for the environment? What can we do for employees? And he would have these philosophy sessions, Yvonne, with the leadership group, and he would say, hey, Shaun, you've got to understand, doing good is good for business. How simple is that as a concept? Doing good is good for business. So worked for them for 2 years, and my wife and I are entrepreneurs, and we decided, we want to go out on our own, we want to start something new. But a couple of years ago, in the front page of the New York Times business section, I read this. Instead of going public, you could say we're going purpose. He gave away his $6 billion company, the biggest environmental donation in the history of the world, to a nonprofit that's trying to solve the climate change issue. Gave away all his shares, his wife's shares, his daughter's shares, $6 billion. So this is a dude that walks the walk and talks the talk. So my wife and I went out and, oh yeah, there's definitely, they deserve a, without a doubt. So, you know, I learned a lot that profit and purpose can live together. You know, you don't have to be one or the other. They're not exclusive. So my wife and I went out on our own. We started another beautiful brand. We called it Solitude. Instinct was about riding in the tube, operating on instinct. Solitude was just about escape, just paddling out towards the open horizon. We were the very first people in surfing, in the surfwear market, to create sustainable and environmentally friendly product. This was 2003. This was 23 years ago. When my mates in the business would come up to me at trade shows, all the guys that didn't give me a chance would say, hey, Shaun, what's with this enviro stuff? You're turning into an effing granola cruncher. I mean, it's the future, baby. So we loved our company, Solitude. And the best thing about it is we located it right across the road from Rincon. My office was about half a mile right across the 101 freeway. And I know some of you have ridden Rincon. It's just a classic wave. I mean, I really loved that wave. You know, I grew up surfing Jeffreys Bay, long right-hand point break, different, but similar in that, you know, you have to have the flow, you have to have the drive, you have to have the power, you have to have the rhythm. So I love J Bay, and then my second love was Rincon. And here's a little clip from how much I love J Bay.
Jeffreys Bay, not far from Cape St. Francis. They had arranged to meet South Africa's most famous surfer there, Shaun Tomson. Their first look was a classic, one of the best days of the year, and Mr. J Bay, Shaun Tomson, was ready. Shaun and his friend Walter came down from Durban, where they live, to hook up with Pat and Wingman.
Oh, thank you. That was good. Yeah. Both that? Nice to meet you, Walter. Be quick. See now they're being in perfect way. Yeah, we saw you get your last wave. Yeah. Go, buddy. Yeah. Come on, guys. Get out there. Come join us. We hit it again.
What a wave. The swell comes rapid around the point. The wave goes on and on. It seems to me the ultimate irony. We found the perfect wave for the time at Cape St. Francis, a longboard kind of wave. Yet only a few miles away is a spot that would be considered a perfect wave by today's standards. That was a good one. Filter keep still. Wake up with a ride that's over a minute long. They say on just the right day at JPA, you can get a ride that lasts 5 minutes. He couldn't wait to get back to Santa Cruz and tell his buddies, oh yeah, J-Bay, me, Shaun Tomson, you know, give him a few tips. Shaun's ridden waves throughout the world, and J-Bay is still his favorite spot.
And I think my very favorite wave in the world is Jeffreys, definitely. I mean, I love the wave. I think it offers a lot of variety, a lot of power.
The wave's very speed orientated, but there's also a place where you can do big, strong movements. And also it has fantastic tube sections, which is the thing that I like best.
So, you know, what a great honor it was to be in that movie. You know, Bruce Brown came to South Africa before I started surfing in 1964 and filmed The Endless Summer, which became the most successful documentary of all time at that time. That whole dream that all surfers have got to search for the perfect wave. It's just been sort of part of the culture and part of the consciousness. So now you can imagine he phones me up and says, Shaun, you know, we're going to come there and we want to film. And I went, wow, you know, that's so awesome. He said, what we're going to do is we're going to stay at Cape St. Francis, the original place where he discovered that the sort of mythical perfect wave, but J Bay is the wave, and then we're going to go down to J Bay. So now that sequence is from the very first day we drove up, and it was perfect. You know, flew all the way out, drove up, nailed it. So now he says, what we want to do is we want to film the original locale at Cape St. Francis of where I was with Robert August and Mike Henson. So we're staying in these little, they've got condos there right now in front of the beach. I promise you, it's dead flat, dead flat. He said, I want to just get a movie of you guys paddling up the point. Perfect offshore blowing, dead flat. We put our suits on, and now we start paddling up the point. As we start paddling up the point, it's like this is surreal, like a 1-footer comes through. We paddle a bit further up, a 2-footer comes through. Paddle a bit further through. Next thing, it's 4 to 5 feet in a matter of 10 minutes. I'm going, Bruce Brown, the dude is a magician. It was just so great. So now I've got my spot at Rincon where Solitude is located, and I get a phone call. Hey, Shaun, it's Glenn Henning here. Do you remember me? I said, of course I remember you. You were the guy that started Surfrider Foundation. How could I forget? He said, well, I need your help again. I wanted your help for Surfrider. I need your help again. He said, Rincon, your adopted home breaks, facing a severe environmental challenge. It's a beautiful area. These are very expensive homes from about $4 to $40 million, maybe $30 million. He said, they're all connected up to septic tanks. It's a hole in the ground. When you flush the toilet, the sewage flows into the hole. He said, when it rains, the water table rises, the effluent overflows, and if there's a river that bisects the break, flows out in the river. You can see that this was a shot from many years ago. You can see like all the brown there. And he said, it's making the surface sick. He said, so I want to do something about it. I said, Glenn, this is a massive problem. He said, it's about a $7 or $8 million problem. I went, whoa. He said, and I'll tell you what, I've got a $100 budget to help you solve the problem. Legit, this is how Glenn Henning thinks. I'm going, no way, Glenn. He said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring a group of students, young people, down to the beach, just like Penelope and Theo. I'm going to bring young people down to the beach. We're going to bring the media down, and we're going to bring like government officials, city officials down. Let's start a groundswell. Through the kids and the media, we'll create this groundswell of support and ultimately raise money and solve the problem. When we went, okay, he said, you've got $100 for about 80 to 100 kids. So I went home and I thought, gee, what can I do? And I promise you that what I did next changed my life and led to me going down a completely different path, ultimately. So this is what I did, and it was so simple. I bust out a sheet of paper, and in 15 minutes, I wrote 12 lines. And I wrote down the fundamental lessons that surfing had taught me about life. With the very first one being one that reminded me of my dad and how Hawaii and the Hawaiians had treated him and given him this new lease on life. I will never turn my back on the ocean. And then the other basic principles that surfing had taught me about perseverance and resilience and courage and commitment, not how to be the number one guy or get the deepest tubes, but just about values, you know, the basic building blocks of our society. With the last one, And when I wrote the last one, I thought of Duke Hanamoka, I will honor the sport of kings. So how can this change anyone's life? Well, I went to the local print shop and I printed up, and every one of you has one of the cards on your chair. I printed up little cards, $100, 100 cards. And so you got 100 cards. What are you going to do? So the kids came to the beach. I gave the cards out and had cards for the media. And we created a groundswell through this Surfer's Code. Ultimately, we created enough publicity. We got a bond passed, and the environmental problem was solved. But these little cards took on a life of their own. And people started phoning me up and going, hey, Shaun, why don't you come and talk at our group about Surfer's Code, about values? So then Glenn Henning phones me up. He says, hey, Shaun, I'm doing an event. I've created a new organization called the Groundswell Society. I'd love you to come and talk about Surfer's Code. So I go to his organization and I present to, I don't know, 100 people or something. I talk about the code. And afterwards, a guy walks down to me and he says, hey, Shaun, I think this would make a terrific book. And I'm going, I've never written a book before. He said, well, I haven't written a book either, but I'm a professor of French literature at Drury University in the Midwest. He said, let's collaborate. And we collaborated and we wrote my first book. 20 years ago, we wrote Surfer's Code. He said, you've got the 12 chapters. You know, we've got the basic structure of the book. So we collaborated over a summer and we produced Surfer's Code. Surfer's Code gets published and it becomes popular and we get some great media around it. The LA Times called it the favorite book of the year. How cool is that for a little surfing book in 2006 when it came out? So the book became popular. Now I'm sitting in the lineup at Rincon with 300 of my best mates. And a guy paddles up to me and he goes, hey, Shaun, my name's Gordon Seachy. I'm a headmaster at a small school in Santa Barbara. We only have 80 students. He said, I'd love you to come and talk to my high school students about Surfer's Code. So I cruise on down to the school and I'm chatting to the students and the local newspaper comes down and covers. You can see me in front of the blackboard there with the book. And I go, Surfer's Code's my code. I wrote it 12 lines. Every line begins with I will. I wrote it in 15 minutes, 105 words. What about all of you writing your codes? Not my code, your words. Just write it, assignment. And I said to the headmaster, it's cool, I'm giving your kids a homework assignment. He said, go for it. So now, about a week later, I get the codes back from the kids. 80 kids, 12 lines. How many lines is that, Penelope? 80 times 12. 960. Yeah, there we are, I'm right. 960 lines of code. And the very first line of code I get back, the very first line of code I ever get back from a student, top left-hand corner, I will always be myself. Those are lines of power. And all the other amazing words that those young people wrote, power, passion, purpose. I will not compromise on my morals to fit in with others. I will think before I will act or do something. I will focus more. I will respect my elders. I will not do what other people want me to do simply to please others. These were lines of such emotion and such positivity and such purpose. It blew my mind. And that first line was particularly poignant and powerful to me because a few months before, my wife Carl and I had lost our beautiful son Matthew at 15 and a half, played a dangerous game that he heard about at school, that all the kids were playing at his school with their school ties. And we'll never really know if it was peer pressure or bullying or whatever it was, but he was pushed into something. And this young girl was going, I'll be myself. I'll be myself. I'm not going to do what I shouldn't be doing. And all those other amazing words that all these young people wrote. So this was as you all will know, if you're losing a child, it's the most devastating thing that can happen. And what happened to me, you know, I like to think that throughout my surfing career, and even after my surfing career, I was one of the most stoked people on the planet. When I was on the tour, no one surfed more than me. No one, I will categorically state, I would put more hours in the water than anyone else on the planet because I just loved it. I loved it so much. I never, ever once thought of surfing as practice, ever. I just loved being out there and pushing myself and trying new boards and just having the greatest time. And, you know, I was fueled and fired by stoke, man. I was so stoked. I remember Kelly Slater, we were J-Bay together a number of years back, and he said, you know, I've never seen someone so surf-obsessed or someone that surfs as long as you. And I said, I'm 60 years old now. You should have seen me when I was 23. I was a stoke dude, but, you know, my stoke had gone out, completely extinguished. And, you know, when you think of stoke, you think of that fire, and it was completely gone. And I had a friend who kept phoning me, because I was back in South Africa, because that's where we lost our boy. And kept phoning me, hey, Shaun, I've got to take you surfing. I've got to take you surfing. And I went, no. And it was a number of months. And then I relented. I went, okay, let's go. And he said, I'm going to take you to a place you've never surfed before. So he takes me up the coast, north of where I live. And we walk down to the beach together. And the sun's rising, because we're on the East Coast, so the sun rises through the ocean. And it's like the sun is boiling up through the ocean. It just looks mind-blowing. And I walked down to the beach, I remember I was crying. It was hardcore. And as I dived into the water, the waves just washed my tears away. It was amazing. And I paddled out and the waves just washed my tears away again, and the waves just washed and it was amazing. It was like so sort of cathartic and cleansing, and just felt beautiful, and it felt like my boy was right there with me. And I paddled out towards the sun. And, you know, 2 hours before I lost my boy, he read me, I was in the States, he was at my old school in South Africa for a semester. He read me this amazing essay that he wrote about tube riding. And one of the lines in the essay was, the light shines ahead. He was talking about riding inside the tube. And he wrote these words, the light shines ahead. So this light, this concept of light, and I'm paddling out towards the sun, it was just so sort of warming and connective. And I paddled out and I swung around. I caught my first wave. I could feel my boy was right there with me. And it was like my world that was off its axis had started to get back on its axis again. And we paddled out, I caught another wave. Felt better, and I paddled out and caught another wave, and it felt better. And my world started to feel like I was on the path again. And those words, the light shines ahead, just resonated so deeply with me. And this is surfing, man. I paddled up to my mate, and I said, what's the name of this wave? Because as we all know, every single surf spot's got a unique name. Sunrise. How about that? Surfing is amazing. So that was a whole new path for me after that. And when I read those words from this young girl, I've always been myself. I got so inspired. I thought, wow, I need to write another book. So I phoned up Patrick, said, we're going to write another book, and this book is going to be a framework for positive decision making. And I saw someone here tonight had it. Who had it with you? Just put it up there. Yeah. So that was my second book, The Code. And every single chapter title was not written by me, but was written by a student, with the very first one being, I will be myself. So now I get codes from people all over the world. I just did an event last week at Pacific Palisades High, the school that was burnt. 5 kids sent me their codes. And the words that young people write are amazing. This is a kid down here in San Diego. Hey, Shaun. My name's Garrison. I met you tonight at Flower Hill Mall, and your words just resonated with me. Now, anyone who's a surfer knows this kid's a surfer, because only surfer spell resonated that way. Full on, that's a surfer kid. But the last line, I will live another day, was particularly poignant. You know, his dad told me his young lad was faced with some pretty tough challenges. So I went to the school in Florida, Holy Trinity Episcopal Academy. And instead of just writing their codes, these students made these posters. And they made this whole exhibition of these beautiful posters from their words to inspire themselves, to inspire their teachers, and to inspire fellow students. I'll never give up on my dreams. I'll be unique. I'll follow my own path. I will electrify. How cool. It's so, I walked in there, they had this art exhibition. It was amazing. I will live out loud. I will always stay happy. I will overcome. I will listen. I will learn. I will love. I mean, I love looking at these. I'll be different. This is a kid in South Africa riding a great white shark. I'll focus on my future. I'll be a positive vibe. I love these two. I will not let negativity bring me down. And I will hold on to happiness. In the context of what's happening in the world today and all the disruption, turbulence, unkindness, hatred, these are so inspiring. I will do no evil. I'll bring change to the world. How about this one? I will rock like AC/DC vibe. I will unlock my hidden power. So all of these words that these young people are writing inspire me. So I went, wow, I've got to learn more about this. So I decided I'd go back to graduate school. Now, I haven't been to university for decades. I'm the oldest dude at grad school. I'm doing a Master of Science in Leadership, the art and science of influence and inspiration. And I come across some amazing studies that could have been written by a surfer. So this study coming out of Yale, it's called the ripple effect. And it's how every single one of us, through our emotions, can influence the other emotions of others by a ripple effect. I just thought it was such a cool study, but they thought it could only happen in a group. Like if you're positive, you can engender positivity. If you're negative, you can impact people negatively. But I came across this other study. It's one of the biggest social studies in the history of the entire world, nearly 700,000 people. How all of us have got the power, viral emotional contagion, by what we tap out, whether you're on a social platform, whether you're on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat, we all got the power. So this is what I try to do because there's so much negativity in the world. Drop a stone, start a ripple, build a wave, to create a positive wave of hope and purpose around the world based on the values of Surfer's Code. That's what I do. That's what my whole life is now dedicated to. So there's a dude who's made a couple of wave machines. You might have heard of him. My wave is different, but I thought I'd have a go on his wave.
Perfection here with technology from Kelly Slater's Wave Company. All the engineers on hand to celebrate this historical day at the Future Classic.
So that was my first wave in the tank.
Wave appeared out of this flat ceiling. It was perfect. I mean, you cried, and it was like this duplication of nature, but in a different way. It opened up a whole new horizon for surfing as a sport, surfing as a lifestyle, for surfing as a family vibe. It was incredible. It was like I saw it many years ago throughout the history of surfing. I've been there for a lot of moments that have changed the sport. Mark Richards first walked down the beach with his twin fin, and Simon Anderson first walked down the beach with his three fin. In your mind you go, it's the future.
So this was the first time, those were the first two waves I had at Kelly's pool. So they invited Mark Richards, Rabbit Bartholomew, Ian Cairns, myself up. They called it the Founders Cup, and it's the first pro surfing event they ever had at Kelly's pool. To test it out, they invite the top 8 surfers in the world, top 8 guys, top 8 girls. So, they're busy, they're competing, and now it's time for our little session with Rabbit, Mark Richards, myself, and they send us out there, and I see all the 16 best surfers in the world. They're all standing there, like looking at us there, seeing like, what are these guys? Have they still got it? So we're waiting for the first wave to come through, and it's a left. It's a left. So I go to MR, I go, hey, Mark, you want the first one? He goes, I'm not effing going left. So I go, hey, Bugs, hey, Rabbit, you want it? He goes, I'm not effing going left either. So that was me on my first wave, and luckily I made a relatively credible impression. But let me tell you, when I was paddling into that wave, it was like paddling into the Pipeline Masters when it was 12 feet. The stress, I didn't want to duff it. So now I've gone back to grad school. I've seen the power that all of us have to ultimately transform emotions and behavior of others. I'm going, is it possible to create a positive wave across a nation by getting young people to inspire each other with words of purpose? What is purpose? Committed intention to realize aims meaningful to oneself and the broader world. So it's not just about self, it's about the broader world. Based on this, I will equals power. When I do events with kids, I get them chanting this, I will equals power, power. It's wonderful to see it in an auditorium. So I hooked up with a big insurance company and a big book publisher, and now I'm doing a positive wave tour in my homeland of South Africa. 35 schools, 60,000 students, getting them to commit to the code. We printed up tens of thousands of these badges to hand out to the kids, and now I'm about to embark on my tour. My first stop is I've told the organizer I want the poorest schools, and I want the poshest schools as well. This is one of the poorest schools in the suburb of Johannesburg, Soweto. It's called Katlehong. And a woman phones me up the night before. She said, Shaun, we've heard about your process of empowerment. We'd love to come and cover it. We have the biggest TV station in the world. It's called China Global Television. We beam out to 1 billion people. And I said, hey, I'm super nervous of how these young kids are going to relate to me. They live 350 miles from the beach. They've never seen the ocean, never seen the sea. They're super poor. They've never heard of surfing. They've never heard of Kelly Slater, Bethany Hamilton, Laird Hamilton. They have no awareness of surfing culture or heritage. And also, I'm an older white dude. They might see me as part of segregation, apartheid, as part of the past. And with kids, if they don't dig you, there's no filter. The tomatoes are coming. Maybe not literally, but figuratively. I said, maybe you can come a little bit later in the tour when I felt it out a bit. She said, Shaun, I'm a journalist and I'm coming tomorrow. And I want you to check out the power and the passion and the purpose of these young people in a school that is so beyond poor.
Surfer Shaun Tomson is one of South Africa's finest sporting heroes. Famous for his style of riding the tube section of the wave, Tomson won the International Professional Surfers World Championship in 1977. Considered one of the 10 greatest surfers of all time, he now inspires others to follow his paddle. In this underprivileged school in Katlehong on the east side of Johannesburg, Tomson shares with youngsters a simple strategy for confronting everyday challenges and making positive, life-changing decisions.
So wonderful to be inspiring some young kid in Johannesburg or Durban or Los Angeles, anywhere, just to know that you drop the log pail in the water and what's it done? It's created a wave. That wave is going to go and touch live.
In 12 personal stories, Shaun shares the power of I Will, a code that carries him through life.
Well, yes, this little code that I wrote 12 lines that I wrote 7 years ago was about sympathy. It's like every line is a metaphor and can be interpreted in so many different ways. It's about how you can be a good person, how you can be a good human being, how you can make a difference in the world, how you can impact others. So I've been on this journey for 10 years now since I lost my beautiful son. And surfing was this constant. Surfing helped get me back on the path to healing again.
Many of these teenagers have barely seen the beach, but the code has resonated among them.
I will achieve my goals. I will be better. I will dream big, and I will be who I want to be.
I will arise and shine, and I will face my fears, and I will take charge of my life.
Although all these youngsters were born after apartheid, many of them are still trapped by poverty. But the code is giving them courage to change their lives.
I deprived right of opportunities, and I'll break that cycle of being deprived of opportunities, and I'll create opportunity for myself.
This book will give me the courage that I don't have. I think it will give me that power to do what I want to do and to believe in myself.
Shaun Tomson's The Code is about many things: faith, courage, creativity, determination. But above all, it's about promises we make to ourselves about the future and to turn hope into action. Judy Shara, CGTN, Catalan, Santa.
Thank you. But how about those kids? You have to understand they are so poor. I was there on a Saturday. They go to school 6 days a week. And I think the kids always turn up because that's where they get a square meal. But it was so, I mean, I was so inspired by those statements and the power and the poise that those young people had. It was really, truly mind-blowing. So I went across the country speaking at massive schools. This was a really interesting school. One of the Nobel laureate nominated guy called Alan Paton wrote one of the most famous books at the school called Cry the Beloved Country. This was one of the greatest moments of my trip and certainly maybe of my life. So I met the guy I'm standing with, Ernest Bongani Nkosi, when he was 10 years old. His mom worked for my mom, was a domestic worker, and he was in the gardening to earn some extra money. And he said, he's just a great young kid. Oh, Shaun, my mom's got no money and I want to go to school. And I was a pro surfer making good money. And I said, I'll pay your way through school. It was nothing for me. And he did really well at school. And then after graduating, he said, Shaun, I want to go to university. And in those days of apartheid, of segregation, not many black kids going to university. And I said, sure, I'll pay your way through university. And I did, and he did really well. And then Carl and I moved to the United States and started working for Patagonia. And when I got back, I get a phone call. Hey, Shaun, it's Ernest Bongani Nkosi here. Do you remember you? I said, of course I remember you. He said, well, I want to tell you about my life. I have 2 university degrees. I have 2 teaching credentials. I'm a headmaster of 1,600 students, and you are coming to speak at my school. There was no discussion. And I went along and I spoke at his school. And I've had the opportunity of speaking with the finest speakers in the world, Richard Branson, Malcolm Gladwell, huge, successful people. And Ernest stood up and introduced me. Now the students, this is just one of the classes. He had 1,600 students. It was a big thing. He stood up. It was like listening to a young Martin Luther King or a young Gandhi or a young JFK or a young Winston Churchill, poised, articulate, just so inspiring. And I looked at him and I looked at all the students sitting there, all attentive. They're so poor, but just turned out immaculately. And I went, wow, I gave him something so tiny. And he turned it into this incredible bounty and was inspiring 1,600 students a day. And I tell you what, I came to understand that when you give unconditionally, who's the real recipient? Not the person you're giving to, but you, for what it does to your soul and what it does just to how you feel about yourself. So it was amazing. So I've got this super cool program because I love to connect with schools and universities. I call it Double Shaka. I spell it with 2 Ks, extra K for kindness. Every time I do an event for like a large corporation, I do a free one for school, university, rehab clinic, prison. And it's classic. It just makes me feel so good. And it's like a little thank you to surfing for giving me so much. So at the moment, I'm doing a Positive Wave tour. And it's so wonderful to be able to connect what I'm doing with Instinct with my outreach to schools and universities and kids, and to have a way to fund this outreach, because I'll tell you what, kids are looking for guidance and they're looking for a tool that's theirs that they can use to empower themselves. They're not there to be instructed, but something that can inspire them. So I have so much fun with it, and I connect. I get like corporations. I spoke at Huntington High School, and I got this big tech company that I worked with to donate 700 books, one for each high school graduating senior. So it's wonderful to be able to connect corporate and business together to do something purposeful. This is El Salvador. These are kids in Australia, all writing their codes. Every now and then I'll help an athlete. This was a great Hawaiian athlete, and couldn't get out of 25th place. I remember 25th. His name was Zeke Lau. I wrote him. I didn't even meet him. Just wrote him and said, I knew the crew, he was writing for Channel Islands back then. You see, write 12 lines, every line beginning with I will. The exercise is called Writing Your Code, and it's the ultimate map for your life tomorrow. It's the way for a warrior. I promise you, he sends me this. A week later, he flies to South Africa. He competes in the same event my dad started in 1969. It's now called the Belito Pro. He goes from 25th to 3rd. Later in the year, he wins an event in Portugal and then wins the World Cup some months later. And I'm saying, this is, you know, as an athlete, or as anyone, you never know where you get the extra juice from. And sometimes the difference between success and failure is a 16th of an inch. I'm not saying that the code was responsible for his success, but maybe it gave him a 16th of an inch. So now I work with all sorts of companies all over the world. I love it. You can see Google, GM, Cisco, Disney. I love sharing my method. You can see this guy's got a data company. The 60 most important lines of code our company has ever written, because there were 60 people, they chose their favorite line, and we create what I call a culture code board. So it's one line from every member in their leadership group. I will spend time in reflection. I will be the best version of myself, and it's wonderful. And you know, this code, it's open source code. So any of you can use it in any way you want for yourself. Maybe you've got a friend, maybe you've got a school rugby team or a school soccer team that you coach. It is amazing. And I tell people, use it in any way you want. Check out how Surfrider Foundation used it. This is narration by Mick Fanning, 3-time world champion.
I will honor the sport of kings. I will realize that all surfers are joined by one ocean. I will catch a wave every day, here in my mind. I will pass on my stone to a non-surfer. I will ride and not paddle into shore. I will know that there will always be another wave. I will watch out for other surfers after a big set. I will always paddle back out. I will never fight a riptide. I will take the drop with commitment. I will paddle around the impact zone. And I will never turn my back on the ocean.
How cool is that? They just did it. Thank you. So I'd like to, if we've got time, do I have time to tell you 2 more quick stories? You guys okay? Or so this is a story about life and death. And it's about perhaps the essence of the Surfer's Code, which one might think is perseverance and resilience, but underlying it is something else that I'll tell you about. So 17 seconds to live. You ride big waves, you know, they're 17 seconds apart, and they usually come in a set of like 5 or 6. So 1975, just finished my second year at first year at university, and I get over to Hawaii. And one of the biggest events in the world back then was called the Smirnoff Pro. It's held at Sunset Beach, surfs about 10 to 15 feet, solid size at Sunset, and I managed to make it through to the finals. And then the surf comes up. And in Hawaii, the surf can come up in like 2-3 hours. It can go from 15 to 25. The surf just explodes. Sunset becomes unrideable. So now they move it to Waimea Bay, like the biggest, at the time, the biggest wave in the world. Now, I'd never surfed Waimea. I had a lot of, done quite well at Sunset, but never surfed Waimea. In fact, I didn't even have a big enough board to surf Waimea. So we all go down the coast to Waimea. It's only about 3 miles away. And I'm standing there on the beach seeing these massive waves just detonate on the outer reef at Waimea. And I've got 6 finalists. All the other guys have surfed Waimea before. They got Waimea boards, they got guns. And I'm running around the beach trying to find a board that someone's going to lend me to paddle out at Waimea Bay. And I'm standing there watching these waves, and they're actually breaking in slow motion. The waves are so big, they're just breaking in slow motion, and they're just detonating and exploding like dynamite. And I'm standing there going, whoa, I'm going to have to go out there and like attack those waves. So we all paddle out together. I'm paddling out with the legends from Australia and the legends from Hawaii, and everyone's sitting in a clump, the takeoff zone. So I'm young, I'm 19, I'm aggro, I'm going to get the first wave. So I jump the line, I'm the rookie, jump the line, I borrowed on my borrowed board, I jump the line, and the first wave of the set comes in, and I paddle into it, and I leap to my feet, and I'm thinking, I got this. And let me tell you, in that type of situation, when you think I got this, your ass is about to be grass. A millisecond later, I'm thinking maybe I don't got this. Waimea hits that reef, and that wave just goes absolutely vertical. And today guys have just got, multi-fin boards, and the boards can like hang in on an edge. But with us, you had that one big skeg. And let me tell you, that board just leapt out of there. So now I'm going through space in slow motion. And I know it's going to be bad, because Ian Cairns, who's one of the greatest big wave riders of all time, said to me, Shaun, when you get hit at Waimea, it's like being hit by a Mack truck. I'm going, yeah, right. How hard can the water be? So this is what happens to me. I go over the edge, I fly through space, and then I land, and then I skip across the surface of the water. And then I'll tell you what, the whole Pacific Ocean, it feels like the whole ocean converges together and impacts me right on the base of the spine, and smashes me and smashes every single iota of air out of my lungs. I'm like a deflated balloon, and takes me down. It's like 20 foot down. It's so far down, and smashes me and bounces me along the coral below. I mean, I didn't even know you could hit the bottom at Waimea. I thought it was too deep. I'm getting smashed around there. I'm getting spun around in a vortex. I've got my eyes closed, and I'm hoping my eardrums aren't going to burst. And I know I've got 17 seconds to live, because if I don't come up in 17 seconds, the next wave's going to be over me. Today, guys have this advanced breath hold training. They can hold their breath for about 3 or 4 hours. And in our day, you were lucky if you could hold your breath for like a couple of minutes. But also, I've had all the gas knocked out of me, so I've got no gas left. And I know if that wave comes over me, I'm a dead man. So I managed to find my footing, and I spring up, and I'm swimming for that surface, and I open my eyes, and I can see that light, and I burst through, and I get the gulp that saves my life. And then the next wave detonates. It feels like it detonates right on my forehead and smashes the hell out of me and washes me in. Now, luckily, someone's coming in on a jet ski. Yeah, right. There was no jet skis then. No one was coming for me. There was no lifeguards. There was no leg rope. You on your own, baby. A lot different to what's happening today. It's just me, my little red shorts, my orange board, and my yellow singlet. There's no one else coming for Shaun Tomson. So my board's floating in the rip, and I doggy paddle in, and it feels like I don't even know if I bust my back. I can barely move my legs. And I clamber up on my board like a jellyfish. And I'm lying there like trembling, freaking out, like, what am I going to do? It's 50 yards to the shore where my mates are, and it's 300 yards back to hell. What am I going to do? Am I going to paddle in, or I'm going to paddle back out? And when I do these huge corporate events and I just chat to kids, I go, all of us are going to come to that moment, that crossroads in our lives when you're going to make that fundamental decision. What are you going to do? You're going to paddle in, or you're going to paddle back out. And I lay there for a couple of minutes. It wasn't that long. But I was really thinking, what am I going to do? Paddle in, paddle back out. And I like to think that that's a defining moment. It's a choice. And, there's this amazing book called Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't read it, you should read it, by Viktor Frankl. And he talks about choice in life, about how we have the power, with the power to make the fundamental choice, what you're going to do. So I knew, man, I had to go. And I swung around and I started paddling back out. And what was amazing? With each stroke, the fear was dissipated. It's quite an amazing sensation because, you have this like visceral fear in your guts, like life and death. And then when you start paddling out, the fear dissipates. And with each stroke, I felt like I was getting stronger and more confident. And I paddled out and I got a bomb. Wow, got an insane one. And I paddled back out, I got another bomb. And I paddled back out and I got another bomb. And I felt so confident and so strong and so powerful and so aggressive. And then I think you judge on your best three then. And the siren goes, and then we all paddle in. And in those days, it wasn't instantaneous scoring. You're up on the podium and, everyone's there and they're announcing the results. And ABC's there and NBC and CBS, all the networks used to come and cover the events. And I'm standing there with the legends, the Aussie guys and the Hawaiian guys, and they go, waiting for the result. And they go, and in sixth place, Shaun Tomson. And I run up there like Rocky. I run up there like I have won the greatest contest of my life, better than 3rd out of 3, like 6 out of 6. And when I look back, it was one of my greatest victories because I've proved to myself, man, that no matter what happened, I'd find the mojo and the power and the purpose to paddle back out. And on the surface, it's about resilience and perseverance. And a lot of us here tonight have had loss. Some people I know, and I'm not going to mention, have had particularly harsh loss like I have had. And dealing with loss is not about perseverance and resilience. Man, it's about hope. About hope. Because only by paddling back out again do you get that next wave. And I gave this presentation a couple of days ago at Pacific Palisades High School and what that high school's been through. And for the first time, I noticed that board. Now, that board is orange. And all of you have got an orange bracelet, and every single one of my books has got orange in. And in our instinct line, we've got this wonderful designer, Troy, and we've got these little orange touches because orange is about hope. And in this world that we live in today, disrupted, divided, unkind, hope. Hope is one of the things that can keep us together on that path. So it's amazing that, surfing can give me this inspiration. It can give me this understanding, and it can give me this hope. Can I have a couple extra minutes? Because I want to just show you this one video. So 1977, I won the world title. I'm feeling really good about myself. I'm at a place called Off the Wall. It's a break that, pioneered riding inside the tube. And Mark Richards, big rival of mine, I see him walk down the beach. And he's carrying a board unlike anything I've ever seen before. It's got 2 fins. It's got the most garish colors you've ever seen in your life. And it's got a big shield on it that says MR, okay? What the hell is this MR? And he walks down the beach and I'm going, hey, what's Mark Richards going to do at the break where I just won the world title? What's he going to do? And he paddles out and he swings around and he takes off and he does this bottom turn, and it's the fastest bottom turn I've ever seen in my life. And then he snaps off the top and does the biggest, gnarliest off the top I've ever seen. I'm going, what? That's the future. I saw it right there. That's the future. Surfing has entered the age of acceleration. The next day, the surf comes up, and I'm out there riding my single fin pintail. Just won the world title on the board, one of those boards, and I'm feeling pretty good myself. And Mark Richards is out there on his twin fin. And Mark and I are full on having this duel in the water as to who's going to be like, not just the world champion, but the world champion in terms of public opinion. So this is what happens to us.
There's always, a duel or Shaun at the beach. Who can outdo the other?
So we have this full-on duel. Mark Richards drops in on me. I freak out because we never used to drop in on each other. He immediately paddles out after he's seen me drop in on him. And now he takes off on that wave and he tries to stuff me in the pit. And then this is what happens.
It's always, a duel in our Shaun, looking out to the other.
So, of course, everyone thinks Shaun Tomson got the better of Mark Richards, deeper back in the tube. Mark tried to stuff him. Shaun got the deep tube right. But I'll tell you what this wave really represents. This wave, it's the only wave ever in the history of the sport that represents an ending and a beginning, an absolute moment, which was the end of the single fin era, and it was the introduction of the age of acceleration and the age of the multi-fin surfboard. Right on that wave, it was described. Now I'm going, I got the better of Mark Richards. I'm going to ride my single fin. I take it to the circuit next year. Mark Richards kicks my ass and everyone else's ass. He's on his secret twin fin, rips us all apart. And I'm, through arrogance and hubris, trying to stay on the single fin. I get my ass kicked until I eventually move to a single fin. Now, it's 1981. I'm at a place called Bells Beach competing. This big Aussie, I love this dude, Simon Anderson, walks down the beach past me and he's got a board with 3 fins on it. I go, hey, Simon, what's with this? He said, mate, this is a 3-fin thruster. And in 3 weeks, you're going to be on one. And I'm just about to say to him, BS, when I'm thinking about what happened with Mark Richards. Simon paddles out there, obliterates everyone at Bells Beach. A week later, Simon and I are in the final of the world's biggest surf contest. It was called the 2SN Coke Surfabout at his home break of Narrabeen. I'm in the finals. I'm on my twin. Simon's against me on his thruster, slaughters me on the final. What do you think I do Monday morning? Hey, Simon, how about making me a thruster, pal? And this is Simon. Now, we are great rivals. We're gunning for the world title, but this is the magnanimous nature of Simon Anderson, that he gave this design to the world. No patent, gave this design to the world and changed surfing. It's still the basis, forms the basis for modern surfing. So my last story is the most beautiful story, and this is like a fantastical story. When I tell it, I can't really believe it actually happened. So we have a wonderful legend in Santa Barbara that we all live under the Rainbow Bridge, that Hutash, the Earth Mother of the Chumash people, planted a magic seed on this island called Santa Cruz Island, which is 24.1 miles directly south of Santa Barbara. And from the magic seed grew the Chumash people, who've actually been living there for 13,500 years. The oldest inhabitants of North America are the Chumash. So she planted a magic seed, the people multiplied and multiplied. And in one of the very first stories of sustainability or lack of sustainability, they ate through all their resources and they started to starve. So they prayed to the Earth Mother, send more food. She said, I'm not going to send more food, but I'm going to build a magic bridge for you, a rainbow bridge. And you can cross the bridge to the mainland, but do not look down. She gave him a prescription. So of course, a lot of people cross to the mainland, to a new life. And it's almost like sort of Judeo-Christian about the story of Noah and hope and the rainbow. 10,000 years before the Bible. And the Jewish Bible had been written, the Torah. So they predate all the religions, the Chumash. So the people crossed, but some people looked down and they got dizzy and they fell. And they fell into the channel and they started to drown. And they prayed to Chumash, rescue us. She said, no, I have got not enough power, but I have enough power for a spell. She cast a spell. She turned them into dolphins. So that whole channel is filled with dolphins. And if you ever come up and surf Santa Barbara, I mean, I surf with dolphins all the time. Sometimes I'll be sitting waiting for a wave and they'll ride with me. I do a cuddy and they'll do a cuddy or turn, or a baby will come here and a mommy will come here. It's amazing. You have this incredible connectivity to these beautiful animals. You could hear them squeak and you stick your head under the water, you squeak back. It's so brilliant. It's just such a great feeling. So I like to think where the rainbow came down is my local beach of Hammond's Reef, which is right by my home in Montecito. It gets pretty good. This is a dodgy day, but it does get great. So my late son, Matthew, and I used to love to surf the break. So on this one day, we went down there looking for surf. It was south wind. We were the only two people on the beach. And he says to me, Dada, I can't believe this. Dada, let's go and check out the memorial. So right on the beach at Hammonds is a memorial and a meadow that is dedicated to the Chumash people. You can see there's a memorial right in the middle of the meadow there. And the Chumash still do their ancient ceremonies there. It's Chumash ground. And they have a beautiful memorial with an inscription. You can see the dolphins on it. The sacredness of the land lies in the mind of its people. This land is dedicated to the spirit and memory of the ancestors and their children. You know, it connects us to the past, the present, the future, to our children. It's beautiful. So we ran up to the memorial, and when you go there, you've got to put down an offering, like a shell or a stone or a feather. We put down our offerings, and then he ran down the beach to the sand, and then he started to collect those little stones that are on the beach, and he arranged the cobblestones into a large circle in the sand. I can't believe we did this. And inside that circle, we made another circle. I'm just going along with my son, and he's just directing me. And inside that circle, we made a third circle. Because you can imagine, just the two of us on the beach, only people on the beach, and we've got these 3 concentric circles in the sand. And then in the innermost sand circle, he put down 2 stones. And then ran off down the beach, got a stick, and he put some kelp and feathers in the stick and came back and said, Dada, this is a sacred story circle. How about that? This is a sacred story circle, and we're going to sit inside the sacred story circle, and we're going to tell each other stories. He said there's just one rule. Whoever's got the stick tells the story. What does the other person do? Just listens. It's just like perfect communication. I mean, I want to take this to the Senate and the House and get these dudes. Exactly. So father and son, it was magical, mystical, mind-blowing. We just passed that stick back and forth, and we told each other stories. We just made up stories. But, you know, out of all the times I've spent on the beaches in the world, you know, winning the biggest comps and riding incredible waves, I reckon that was the best time. That deep connectivity and love with my boy, eye to eye, heart to heart, soul to soul, just that incredible connectivity, the actual meaning and purpose of life. And you know, those moments are super rare for one reason, because we make them rare because of this crank. Because this is supposed to be a tool of connectivity, but it's a tool of disconnectivity so much. We just get sucked into the vortex here. And those moments when you just like sit there with your boy or your wife or your husband or whatever, they are so incredibly connective. And reading that inscription and the spirit. So I spoke at this amazing school in Hawaii a few years back. It's called Kamehameha School. It's dedicated to preserving and protecting Hawaiian heritage and culture. You have to be of Hawaiian descent to go to Kamehameha School. It's the biggest landowner in the state of Hawaii. I think it has perhaps the biggest endowment in the world of any school. It's amazing. You know, it's been responsible for the renaissance of Hawaiian heritage and culture. And I spoke in their chapel to thousands of students. And when I spoke, the chaplain said to me, to the students, he said, students, I want you to bow your heads and I want you to give Shaun your mana, your life force, your power. It was incredible, this wave of mana rolled across the auditorium to me. And he said to me, the chaplain, he said, you know, when you were speaking to your son, you were speaking in spirit language. How about that for a beautiful, beautiful concept? So our time on the beach was over and we drove up the hill to my home. I only lived just down the road from Hammonds. And as I put my key in the lock, Matthew, his name in Hebrew means gift from God, dug in his pocket and he pulled out a stone. And I said, Matthew, what's that? He said, Dada, this is a sacred story stone from the sacred story circle. And you know all the stories we told today? They're all inside the stone. How about that? And he put the stone right outside my front door. And you know, on some days, right in front of that white lamp, and the stone sort of mystically moves around the garden. But you know, some days I come home, not every day, but some days I come home and I put my key in the lock and I close my eyes and I listen. I can't hear the stories, but I can feel the manna, can feel the spirit. And I'm hoping today all of you have felt my spirit and that I've given you some of my manna, some of my power, some of my purpose, because the world is divided, the world is broken, the world is turbulent, and every single one of us got the power. We got the power to impact other people positively or negatively. We've got to make the choice. So for me, surfing makes my life better. So what's next? I promise you, the winds are going to blow from the north, the south, the east, the west. They're going to blow all my words away. We've had a beautiful night tonight, a lot of mana, a lot of energy, but the winds are going to blow. So I'm asking all of you, you can go to my website, you can, on the back of that card, you can go and you can download that code. And you can write your code and you can share it with your friends, you can share it with your family, and together we can build this positive wave of hope and purpose right across the world. I'm super active on social media. I'm always doing very uplifting, powerful posts. It's been my great honor to present to you Jim Kempton. Thank you for having me. It's been awesome. Double shocker, everyone. Thank you.